Good evening, g'day. It's now 6:30 sharp, and as I'm set on a Swiss clock, or like Immanuel Kant, I am ready to start for today, for this week. So I'll wait until some join us, hoping that there will be a few. Let me check at the same time that I've got a couple of viewers. So I see there is one person. So hi, okay. So one viewer for now. Hopefully there will be more guests for today. So today is devoted to data access and relevance. So how you choose your empirical material and your data set, which is an extension of what we discussed last week. But before I engage in this, hi, good evening, Shuhei. Nice to see you tonight. So first, congratulations on submitting your research proposal yesterday. So it was a good one. So congratulations. You can be proud of yourself. We're 4 plus me, so 5. So yeah, for tonight, data access and relevance. That's what I will discuss. But prior to this, as usual, I will give you some news from the AI front and also from my own odyssey, and I will make an announcement as to some minor changes to my streams from next week on. So first, the news for this week from the AI front. There are, let's say, mainly two big pieces of news that have been important. Hi, Rachel, that have been very important this week. The first one is that early this week, the Pentagon in the US, the Department of Defense, the Pentagon gave Anthropic an ultimatum whereby the company, so Anthropic is the company developing and commercializing Claude. So the Pentagon gave them this ultimatum. They had until Thursday to agree to let the Pentagon use their AI for two purposes. One was for lethal weapons, and the other one was also to organize the surveillance of American citizens in this fight against terrorism. This is where Anthropic was at this week, and Dario Amedeo, so the CEO, has been resisting, and I said no. He said no, I will not have my AI, so Claude, serve lethal purposes and anti-democratic purposes or agendas nowadays. On the military front, having AI used for lethal purposes is problematic now, as AI is not reliable enough, he said. It is not accurate enough. So if there are drones that are self-monitored, good evening, Mirella. If there are drones that are self-monitored with AI and that can shoot with AI that is not accurate enough, there is too much of a risk for civilians. And for that simple reason, Anthropic said no. Regarding the surveillance of American citizens, here it is a matter of privacy and democracy. In the name of fighting against terrorism, you cannot justify everything and anything. Here it's a philosophical question, which is the end would not justify the means, and here Anthropic decided that they would not let the Pentagon do so. What has happened in response? Any US agency, so governmental agency, is no longer allowed to use Claude. Anthropic is blacklisted, considered unreliable, considered a potential enemy of the US, so that there might be a big consequence for us in the rest of the world. And the big consequence is owing to the extraterritoriality of US laws. In a nutshell, when you are dealing with anything relating to the US, you are potentially subject to US laws. That is, when you trade with either the dollar, so in dollars, with the currency, even if it's between a European country and an Asian country, you are subject to US laws. Likewise, if you deal with anybody or any organization in the US, wherever you're in the world, you are implicitly subject to US laws. And how is this manifested? This is manifested in the fact that companies potentially subject to US laws have to share with US authorities all their data, all their files with the Department of Justice in case there is an investigation either on it or on any other party with which it could be associated. Here in the case of Anthropic, it does mean that the Department of Justice could consider that Anthropic is a threat for the US, for the security of the country, could decide on an investigation against Anthropic, and could decide to access data from all Anthropic's clients and all Anthropic users in the world, which means that all those companies anywhere in the world, all around the world, using Claude Code or Claude Q, which I mentioned last week, are potentially subject to share their data with the Department of Justice. We're not there yet, but we're never far from this happening, especially in the context where the US so the Trump administration is trying to dominate everybody in the country, is trying to also dominate tech companies, the big tech companies. There's a real risk. So that, and it's very interesting, it's not a big piece of news, that's something I experienced this week. So that a number of schools in Europe, and I'm not giving names, but a number of schools and universities in Europe are considering not using US tools anymore. And it was pretty funny, or if I may say so, as we had this talk over a Teams meeting. And Teams is Microsoft. And Microsoft is a US-based company. So that there is at the moment an awareness, a growing awareness of the risk associated with US material, but still a strong dependence to them. And this was also central this week to discussions regarding sovereignty. So we will hear it growingly, more and more discussions on digital sovereignty for Europe. And this was something I mentioned a couple of weeks back already with the construction of data centers in France, with the construction of a big data center in Sweden by French AI company Mistral, plus also the opening of mines in the middle of France from extracting some critical metals and stuff. Also, this week, in this vein, in France, a big refinery for critical metals, nickel and cobalt, was announced. So the construction of such a refinery was announced, and those metals are necessary, are critical to batteries for electrification, but also are critical for data centers and AI processors. So here, France will have companies doing it. So refining, so dependence on China, dependence on the US should be, or hopefully will be, less. This was a big piece of news for this week. And interestingly, as we are speaking of technology and defense, the iPhone 17 was approved by NATO as a safe device, so for level 1 security. What does it mean concretely? Concretely, it means that iPhone 17 is one of the sole telephones in the world that NATO staff is allowed to use for personal communications. For professional, for defense-related matters, they're not, but for personal communications, they are, which is not the case of most other devices. So here, Apple has made a huge step forward in terms of security and recognition for that. Something which was not a big event this week, but very significant, very important, I think. Likewise, the other big piece of news for this week was a report released by Citrini, so US think tank Citrini, on the impact of AI on employment in 2030. And this report, which was not meant to be really made public, or it was released but was not meant to be very popular, caused a quasi-crash on the capital markets. The whole world being really worried about the forecasts. According to the report, in 2030, there will be a big increase in unemployment all over the world because of AI. There have been lately announcements that AI would destroy probably 92 million jobs in the world, but would create an extra 150 million jobs, which means that the creation of new jobs with AI would be around 60 million. And this report by Citrini contests this and reaches very worrying conclusions. Where also a big concern that they express is with this unemployment, the big problem is that people will no longer have money for consumption, so that even if AI-driven businesses are very productive and are good at what they're doing, there will not be the customer base for their products, and at some point it will be problematic. So this caused, like I said, big worries on the stock exchange, so that most businesses have suffered, starting from the Magnificent Seven, so those tech and AI companies, so the GAFAM plus Anthropic plus OpenAI, and here we are, so the 7 ones, they have suffered first, plus also software companies, plus nearly all industries have suffered from this. I have no idea really how realistic those dramatic and dystopic forecasts are, but what is interesting is that for the first time they are considered in a systemic manner. That is, it is not just about jobs that are destroyed, but it is about new directions for their economy and possibly new directions for capitalism. And if we wanted to be Marxist, we could even ask if AI means the end of capitalism. If there is no more consumption, then is there still a need for production? And in this case, no consumption, no production. Do we need businesses at all? Do we still need money at all? So this is another political, philosophical question raised by this report. So that the capital markets have also expressed big concerns regarding the financing of AI businesses. As you might have noticed, we speak of huge amounts of money in hundreds of billions of dollars, and each of this amount, each of those investments is funded through debt. And there starts being worries around solvency. So will those massive investments be reimbursed at all? If AI companies cannot reimburse, then we might go to a new financial crisis, as in 2008, as with the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008. Not for the same reasons, but because of debtors' insolvency, and this with unrealistic or unreasonable amounts of money. So I'm sorry if it might be a bit worrying, if this causes anxieties, but it was not the purpose. But this is what I saw this week, and what the main discussions around AI and technology have been. Now, my own journey. For now, I'm glad because this week I've made a number of progresses in a number of areas. First, if you remember, I showed you the English test and demo page of my tools, and I uploaded this weekend, the French version and the splash page with which I can show you. I know that the French version will not be very pertinent for you, but I'm showing you now so how it looks, at least for the splash page when you reach it. I'm quite happy with this. So test.grades.education.eu, and here you can choose your language, French, which is the one I managed to upload this weekend, and the English version had already been here for a little while. So this is something I did, and it is a sort of a little victory for me. I'm quite happy with this. Also, what I did this week on this same front is that I developed an app with which is here, and specifically so where is it? So it should be here. Build, yeah, here. I developed a little app to create a user account. I mean, in particular for tests. When I have a school interested and willing to test the tools, then now I can automate this with just putting the names here, then the username, creating a password, ticking the tools that are allowed, so in English or French version, and then create user access. What I have not automated just yet is the sending of those connection details. For now, on purpose, I want them to be sent manually, but next step will be the automation of this. Here it is just a matter of one click, whilst so far I had to use the shell, so the terminal, and write it manually for each, and each time. So here I'm here I'm creating an account for someone, and then I had to enter the password once per each and confirm once for each. So for myself, opening access to 9 tools, it means that I should enter the password 18 times. Too much unnecessary work. I'm glad as I could do this for this week. Also, I've been working on a different app, but I'll show you another day when it's finished. So another app which extends the technology we are developing here with Mirella and with Rachel. But I'll show you next week or soon. Then what else? For this week, I had also some meetings that were promising. One was with someone in Ivory Coast willing to establish an executive education school in association with local and with an international universities, and needing someone speaking French to advice, and I'm now waiting more on what he is exactly expecting. So we had a very fruitful meeting on Monday, and we are likely to work together to develop something together. Also, I had a meeting with Dauphine University to speak about my tools, and there might be an interest. So there is no doors closed. There might be an interest. So I'm invited to discuss those issues in a meeting they're having in May with master program directors, and we'll see by then. Also, I did a demonstration with another business school. Here too, the person is not the final decision maker, so I've not spoken to the final decision makers, and I have no idea how far things will go with them, but at least there was something. There is a sort of an interest. So I didn't see big enthusiasm as compared to other schools, but maybe, you never know. And something that also is very recent, as I received the email today, about half an hour ago, or just before we start tonight's stream, it was an email from someone in charge of digital projects in a scientific association, and he's more than interested in the tools because those associations, journals and universities do not have such tools just yet, and mine are very spot on. So we're having a meeting this coming week within a couple of days, and we'll see what comes out from this. So very promising, really happy. And what I wanted to say also for next week on, I will of course continue streaming. I will probably structure my streams a wee bit differently. It will not be very visible. The difference will not be very visible, but I'll try to be a wee bit different, where the challenge for me is to enhance the visibility of my Twitch channel. So now that I, let's say, understand how it works, what customs and habits are, etc., I will try to scale up a bit, for which I need to be able to derive short clips from my streams. There's short clips that can be promoted and that will make my visibility, that will style. And this means that I will try to have in my streams some punchlines at times, and things that are explicitly meant to be then converted into short clips. For this, I have also been working on a tool that will automatically detect in my streams those passages that might be relevant for short clips, for short videos. So I'll see. And my idea is to really accelerate and scale up. And for this, I will need to feed my channel with more videos than just the replies of my streams. So this is, I would say, the big announcement. And for today, we will discuss data access and relevance. And for this, I will give you some hints. I will develop 3 directions, and I will discuss 3 prompts that can help. As Now, as you can see, as you may have seen, for a couple of weeks, I have decided to bring more and more prompts into the discussion when pertinent, when necessary. So here, what you must have in mind is that access to data is not relevant. Your data is not relevant because you can access it. Very often, students confuse or make mistakes, being unclear as to what they can really access and what in this access is scientifically relevant or pertinent. It is not because you have access to certain people or to certain data or to certain company that you have eventually access to pertinent data, which means that there's a question that should always be asked, which is what field is, or what type of data set is pertinent for me, and how can I access it? And this is especially true for students who are on an apprenticeship or for DBA students when they take their own company as their fieldwork and their company as their main source of data, and where they tend to adapt their question, their research question, to what they have available. And it's instead of doing the opposite, where you start from a question and then you find the relevant data. And here, if you introvert both, if you start from what you see in the company where you're working, if you take this as a starting point and derive a question from this, it is, scientifically speaking, problematic, or it may be problematic. You might be unable to address something which is really pertinent for research. And of course, yes, it might be pertinent for the company where you're working, but their concerns are not necessarily scientific concerns. And then you might, at the end of the day, be off exercise. You might miss the point. So, concretely speaking, or technically speaking, the problem is not how many interviews should I have, how many respondents to my survey should I have, which I often hear, but the very problem is to know whether my fieldwork, my empirical data, has been chosen out of scientific necessity or out of practical opportunism. If it is opportunistic, then it might not be justifiable. And what is important is that you should be able to justify that that the data you choose is useful to answer your research question. So it is a cause-effect problem which finds itself inverted. So we should start from the question and go onto the field, and here we might have instead the field suggesting the question. And it's really a structural matter, a structural problem. And therefore, I'm now showing you a prompt and we will test it together. I'm showing you a first prompt, which we might run several times as we do usually. So now let me share my screen with you one more time. Okay, role. You are a field question coherence examiner. Your task your task is to determine whether my field is scientifically derived from my research question or opportunistically chosen based on pure access. Do not propose corrections or improvements. That's not the point. Input, research question, field or organizational studied, reason for choosing this field, practical constraints if applicable, output format, first, dominant logic, question field or field to question, second, level of practical dependency, low, medium, high, risk of opportunistic bias, low, medium, high, one analytical paragraph explaining the actual logic at work, the structural tension, if applicable, the scientific risk created by this configuration. So here is the prompt aimed at checking whether your data is chosen for, let's say, for good reasons or for bad reasons. It does not mean the data is good or bad, but if it's chosen for bad reasons, then it starts being problematic. If it is chosen for good reasons, because it helps you answer your research question, it is fine. So here, I'm sharing my screen again, and we will run the prompt. So, okay, I will copy and paste the prompt in Gemini, and then Shuhei, if you're still here, and if you allow, we could continue like last week with your thesis. So just let me know if you allow for it. If yes, then I'll continue. If not, I'll take something different. Okay, great. So, sorry for the fractal. Here it's codex. So sorry, I'm on the wrong AI. Okay, here. Right. So here, input research question is how are MCS reconfigured during a perceived growth phase. Field or organization studied. No particular organization, but those people involved in the reconfiguration of MCS. Reason for choosing this field, the main reason is that I do not want a single perception related either to one company or one type of role. I want to catch the dynamics and interactions at work in the reconfiguration of an MCS. Practical constraints, if any, not that I know just yet. And then we'll see what happens. So, based on your input, here is the coherence examination for your research design. Dominant logic question to the field. That's good. Level of practical dependency, low. Risk of opportunistic bias, low. So everything is good. Analytical paragraph. The logic at work here is strictly thematic and process-oriented rather than organizational, signaling a clear derivation of the field from the research question, which is very good. By designing the field as the people involved in the reconfiguration rather than a specific entity, you are prioritizing the social material interactions required to answer a how question over the convenience of a predefined physical site. The structural tension exists between your desire for a multi-role perspective and the difficulty of tracking a single process across fragmented actors who might not share a common organizational boundary. While this minimizes case study bias, it introduces a scientific risk of decontextualization. Interesting. So this means that and I'll explain. Here, what happens is that taking people from different organizations without necessarily knowing the specific context, without having a deep understanding of their organization, of their currents, of their wins and wither, you might have something which is which lacks flesh, if we understand. Without a stable organizational backdrop, it might be difficult to weigh which perceived growth pressures are truly driving the MCS changes versus external market noise. You risk capturing a collection of individual anecdotes rather than a cohesive reconfiguration dynamic if the actors selected do not share a common operational reality. And therefore, here it's important that we will rerun the prompt with a slight change. Therefore, it's very important that you have people confronted with similar circumstances so that they have comparable views and not scattered perceptions or isolated perceptions. Here is the main risk which is identified running this prompt. So let's try slightly different. So the research question remains unchanged. Reason for choosing, so field or organizations. No particular organization, but those people involved in the people confronted with similar business and organizational circumstances and across organizations occupying comparable roles. Reason for choosing this field. Do not want a single perception related either to one company or one type of role. I want to catch the dynamics and interactions at work. Neutralizing circumstances and occupation as similar across organizations. Practical constraints, not that I know just yet. So let's see with this slight change what happens. So the dominant logic is unchanged. We're still question driven. The level of practical dependency is still low. So no change. Risk of opportunistic bias is still low. Now, analytical paragraph. The logic at work is conceptual and comparative, prioritizing the theoretical mechanism of management control system reconfiguration over the idiosyncratic features of a specific firm. Absolutely. By selecting participants based on shared roles and organizational circumstances, the growth phase, rather than a single site, you are employing a purposive sampling strategy designed to isolate the phenomenon from local noise. Here we have solved the problem identified before, where there were potential noises that we would not have captured and that could have been the real explanation of the problem. And here we have neutralized this problem. So, however, a structural tension arises between your goal of catching interactions at work and your decision to decouple those actions from a shared organization. Interaction is a relational process. If your field consists of individuals in comparable roles across different companies, you are observing parallel behaviors rather than the localized reciprocal dynamics of a specific reconfiguration. Yeah, that's true, but that's not what we want to do. So for me, it's not a problem. So the primary scientific risk is abstracted empiricism. You may successfully identify common professional responses to growth, but you risk losing the situational friction and internal power struggles that define how an MCS is actually reconfigured in practice. Here, what is very true is that interviews across different organizations will allow us to have the perception of those people, but not the dynamics at play, not interactions per se. So either we change slightly the field so as to show, so to have a field which is more interaction driven, or we slightly change the reason for choosing this particular field. I suggest we do not change the field, but we can do it later. I suggest we just change the reason. So here I want to catch the dynamics and interactions at work. We want to catch the lived experience of reconfiguring an MCS. And here it's slightly different. So last week we saw that the wording can make a big difference. Here we are also adjusting a bit, and here let's see. So the diagnostics is unchanged for the first three dimensions. Then the analytical paragraph. Here, by just changing this a wee bit, we have the logic at work is phenomenological and cross-sectional, driven by a desire to isolate the lived experience of management control systems change from the specific idiosyncrasies of a single corporate culture. That's exactly it. By defining the field through the actor's involvement in the process rather than employment at a specific site, you are prioritizing the sense of the reconfiguration process over organizational case study depth. That's true, and so far so good. However, a significant structural tension exists between your aim to capture how an MCS is reconfigured, true, a process that is inherently relational and political, and a field composed of disconnected individuals. Reconfiguration typically involves negotiation between different hierarchical levels within a single entity. The primary scientific risk here is the loss of organizational context. By aggregating disparate individual perceptions, you might successfully map a shared psychology of growth, but you risk missing the mechanistic reality of how specific systems are technically altered, resisted, or institutionalized within a concrete power structure. Here, where I agree, is with the fact that we are still dealing with how a management control system is reconfigured. So the research question, given the accessible material, is probably not the right one. So either the research question needs to be changed, in which case we will be sort of field driven, or we change the material. I suggest just changing the material for the purpose of this prompt. I'm not meaning, Shuhei, that you must change it, right? So here, ethnography and participant observation at my company, where I'm working as a chief management accountant. It does not matter if it's not quite right, but at least you will see the point. Here we are doing the opposite. So here I want to capture interactions, power dynamics, and unspoken phenomenon with a deep understanding of organizational background. And incidentally, and here, practical constraints, my current role as such, my bias, interactions with other participants, if I do not develop a guardrail protocol. And here we'll see what comes out. Here, based on your input, here is the coherence examination for your research design. Dominant logic field question. I'm not quite convinced. So here we start from the question, but yeah. So here it says field to question because we justified that we want to have interactions, etc. But okay, level of practical dependency high. Yes, because you are involved as a chief management accountant in this company. Risk of opportunistic bias, very high for the same reason. One analytical paragraph. Here, the logic at work is opportunistic and autoethnographic, where the research site is selected based on your pre-existing professional immersion and privileged access as a chief management accountant. While the reason for choosing this field is framed through the scientific merit of deep understanding, the primary driver is the unique high-level access you already possess. A significant structural tension exists between your dual roles. As an actor, you are a primary driver of the MCS reconfiguration, yet as a researcher, you seek to observe it. This creates a double loop where your data collection might inadvertently influence the very phenomenon you are trying to study. The primary scientific risk is asymmetric reflexivity. Your presence as a senior figure might lead to social desirability bias among subordinates, masking the unspoken phenomena you wish to capture. Furthermore, your deep organizational background, while an asset for context, poses the risk of going native, where your familiarity prevents you from questioning the normative assumptions underlying the growth phase. Here, we could continue infinitely on this prompt, But I'll stop with this prompt as I wanted to show you here how we are grounded either in the question or in the field when we start, and also what risks are associated with either perspective. Here, with I started from your case, Shuhei, and showed how slightly different approaches or slightly different justifications could lead to actual different perspectives and problems. So it's always a matter of wording, as we discussed last time. So the second dimension I want to discuss for tonight is the representativeness illusion. Here, very often we have questions, so students asking the same question, which is how many interviews should I conduct? Or I interviewed 12 managers, or I interviewed the world's expert on the theme, or I want to have, if I do a survey, I want to have a sample which is representative for the whole world, for the whole population. Here, the problem is that we do not start correctly. Here, the problem is legitimacy and representativeness. Many people think that having a limited number of observations is not serious enough, and that conversely having many is more serious. It is not that easy, actually. Actually, the very logic is the very question is, what is the inference logic at play? Is it statistical, in which case indeed you need a high number of observations? Is it analytical, in which case you do not need to have many, you need to have sufficient variety of observations so as to make your point? Is it illustrative? If it is illustrative, you do not need many. One could be enough. A case study could work. So here, again, we are getting back to the research question itself, as discussed last week, where depending on the type of question you're asking, then you will not do the same things. So if you want to draw a universal law of the world's functioning, of course, you will need to have a high number of observations that are representative for the whole world. For tonight, I will not speak in detail of the population sampling logic, case logic, analytical generalization. This will come from next week on. For tonight, we're still with the premises and sort of an introduction to data selection. So for this concern on representativeness and this illusion it can raise, I've got another prompt which I'm sharing with you right now. If you just give me a second. How can I? Start from current slide. Here we are. Back here. So here the second Prompt says, Raoul, you are an inference logic analyst. Task. Identify the type of inference my field and sample actually allow. Do not suggest improvements. Input, target population, actual sample, type of data, research objective, and we'll get back to this. Output format, type of inference supported, statistical, analytical, illustrative, or exploratory. Second, coherence between ambition and sample, coherent, fragile, incoherent. Third, risk of overinterpretation, low, medium, high. One analytical paragraph explaining what the sample truly allows, what it does not allow, where the boundary of legitimacy lies. So here, the idea is that we should be relatively clear with the population we want to capture. And we can't, and we must accept the fact that we will never be able to capture the whole population, the whole world. So we'll have to be as clear as possible with the main characteristics this population should have, and then try to build a sample, so a representation, a fractal view, a fractal representation of this population. That is a sample of people sharing the same characteristics as this population in relation to the research question. And we'll get there soon. Type of data, we know. Research objective, so we know. We have it already. So I suggest we run the prompt. Here, back to Gemini. Okay, so here the input, so target population, those people involved, those professionals involved in the reconfiguration of the management control system. Actual sample. So for now we're not totally clear, but let's say thus far a handful of CEOs, chief management accountant officers, consultants, task force members, PAs, personal assistants. Type of data, it will be interviews, so let's say open-ended interviews. Research objective, it's to understand how the MCS is reconfigured during a growth phase. Let's see what Gemini says. Type of inference supported, exploratory and partially illustrative, coherence between ambition and sample, fragile, risk of overinterpretation, high. Okay, analytical paragraph. The sample truly allows for the identification of diverse subjective perspectives and the mapping of initial themes regarding how different professional roles experience the pressures of a growth phase. By including a varied mix of CEOs, consultants, and task force members, you can capture the polyphony of voices involved in MCS changes, which is excellent for generating new hypotheses or identifying unspoken phenomena. However, the sample does not allow for processual tracing or the validation of causal mechanism, which is true, as we do not see the dynamics, we were not on the boardroom, we cannot really know that. So, as the handful of participants are likely disconnected across different organizational contexts, you cannot claim to see how a system is reconfigured in a structural sense if you aren't observing the specific interactions, that's what I was saying, between these actors within the same system. The boundary of legitimacy lies at the thematic level. You may legitimately report on the shared anxieties or strategies of these professionals, but you cannot generalize those findings as a universal model of MCS reconfiguration or claim to have captured a cohesive organizational dynamic. That's very true. That's very true. I agree. Here the problem remains the wording of the objective, the research objective. So the problem is how it is reconfigured. Let's see how. So let's rewording slightly differently. So here the problem is that this how it is reconfigured is suggestive of the study unveiling the interactions, the discussions, boardroom discussions, disagreements between people, trials and errors, iterations when reconfiguring the MCS. And just having interviews does not allow to capture this, as it gives a snapshot view of perceptions and not even a snapshot view of the people actually involved and a state of discussion at some point. So it should be, let's say, it should be a film, a movie, and we've got a photograph. It should be a dialogue, and we've got a narrator just telling a story. This is where there might be a sort of a inconsistency. So here, let's slightly reword this, so the research objective. Understand how the MCS is reconfigured during a growth phase. Understand how professionals perceive the necessity of reconfiguring MCS during a growth phase. So here it's not how it is reconfigured, but how people see that it should be, and how those professionals perceive it. And then I think we'll have higher consistency. Look, suddenly type of inference supported, exploratory, no problem. Coherence between ambition and sample, coherent, that's good. Risk of over-interpretation, medium. And their analytical paragraph says that the sample truly allows for phenomenological mapping of how different professional archetypes construct the necessity of MCS change. By including a wide vertical and horizontal span from strategic CEOs to operational PAs and external consultants, the sample is very well suited to identify competing rationalities and shared mental models triggered by a growth phase. However, Because the research objective is now centered on perception rather than the technical process of reconfiguration, the sample does not allow for a structural or functionalist validation of the MCS's actual performance or design. Yes, but that's not the point. We do not seek to check whether this reconfigured MCS is appropriate or not. We see how people see that it's necessary. So the boundary of legitimacy lies at the discursive level. You might legitimately theorize on the social construction of necessity among these actors, but you cannot infer that these perceptions represent a unified organizational reality or a replicable blueprint for MCS implementation. No, that's true, but we're not interested. We're not interested anyway here in the actual implementation with this wording, with this question. So I think this works quite well. Maybe we could refine a tiny little wee bit. Let's try one more time, just to see. Here, professionals involved in reconfiguration, open-ended interviews. I'd like to understand how professionals perceive the necessity, irrespective of its actual implementation and irrespective, of its suitability to the situation. So here now something has significantly changed. The risk of overinterpretation is low, because the sample truly allows for a discursive mapping of the mental models and professional rationalities that trigger the perceived need for MCS change. By explicitly decoupling perception from actual implementation or suitability, you sample a varied actors from the strategic heights of the CRO to the operational vantage point of the PRA is well suited to identifying symbolic and cognitive drivers of change. It allows you to explore how growth acts as a catalyst for professional anxiety or ambition, regardless of whether the resulting MCS is technically sound. However, the sample does not allow for causal claims regarding organizational performance of the material effectiveness of the reconfigured systems. That's true, but that's not the purpose, so it's fine. You can therefore not infer that these perceptions represent a best practice or factual account of organizational needs. No, but that's not the problem. That's not the purpose. Here we want to see how people perceive this need and talk about it. So, the boundary of legitimacy lies strictly within the phenomenology of the actors. You can legitimately report on how these individuals construct this necessity of change, but you must avoid projecting these subjective justifications as objective organizational requirements. No, but that's true. Here we do not claim that we will identify best practices or objective requirements. No, we want to see how people think about those and what they have to say about those. And this is what makes the study interesting, because someone could see a potential discrepancy between what people think and say on one hand and what is actually done on the other. So here, what could be derived from this is either a unified discourse where we see that a variety of people with different backgrounds and responsibilities might share common perspectives on the need for a reconfigured management control system. Or we might identify different patterns of perceptions, which could be based on their roles within the organization. Maybe the strategic heights, like the CEO has a distant perception of this need, where management accountants think that it's very important, or conversely, not conversely, or alternatively, personal assistants see a big need because the ERP is dysfunctioning or is inadequate to the situation, so according to them. So that's something that could be derived from this study. And this is where it's indeed exploratory, predominantly exploratory. So, having said that, I now, unless there are questions or remarks, I'm just checking. Un message pour la résolution, détection intelligente, expirée, non postée. Okay, sorry. So, I'm now moving to the third axis for tonight, which is that of professional bias. Here, and the professional bias was already elicited with the first prompt. Here, the internship bias is something very, very powerful, very strong, as the internship or the fact that you're working where you are doing your research could create role conflict, loyalty bias, strategic silence, self-censorship, and I will give you some examples, but your field is never neutral when you belong to it. And because it is not neutral, at some point, you must implement guardrails. You must find solutions to investigate on your own premises without it causing problems. Here, I can give you a few situations where there were such biases and problems. One was a DBA student of mine who did a great dissertation on the development of a Sufi leadership model, and he did his dissertation in his own company, in the company whose CEO he was, and it was on his leadership style. So here we identified at the very beginning that there would be probably a loyalty bias, where people would probably praise him and would probably not be totally countered to him. So we decided that that a third party person would conduct their interviews without telling that it's for him, so that interviews were conducted with employees for the purpose of a doctoral work, but who the author of the doctoral work is was unspoken. So here the problem was that he needed to have someone capable of thinking like him capable of knowing him so well that this person would have asked the right questions, would have reacted like he would have continued their interview as he would have, etc. This means that he was to hire that person long ahead and train her to his way of thinking, his way of working, etc. So that this person could be his shadow. This is what eventually done. Another student of mine did something on shared service centers for accounting. So shared accounting services in the company where he was the CFO. And he was conducting focus groups and interviews with accountants. And here there was the same problem. So that he did something similar, hired a bundle of MBA students of his, as he was teaching in an MBA program, to organize this, so to conduct their interviews and to run the focus groups in his stead, so as to avoid role conflicts, self-censorship, or silence from participants. So here I'm now showing you the third prompt for tonight, which is an extension of what we have seen so far. Your role, you are a researcher positioning analyst. My task: examine the methodological implications of my position within the field studied. Again, do not propose corrective strategies. Input: my status: intern, employer, external researcher, etc. Hierarchical relationship, if applicable. Nature of my relationship with participants. Research topic or research question. Output format: level of embeddedness, external, semi-internal, internal. Second, primary structural risks, self-censorship, social desirability bias, conflict of interest, analytical blind spots. Third, degree of methodological vulnerability, low, medium, high. Fourth, one analytical paragraph explaining the structural tensions created by this position, the potential impact on data quality, the epistemic risks involved. Now let's run this prompt and see what comes out. Here we are. So let's say my status. So here let's consider you are not working on your company. So you are an external researcher evolving in the same professional networks as other participants. Hierarchical relationship, none. Nature of my relationship with participants, peers, colleagues, and friends, maybe. Research topic, so let's take the research question that we had here. Research up, and here we see what comes out. Level of embeddedness, semi-internal, professional and social peer. As you are from the profession, as you know people's concerns, you have probably the same concerns as they do, then yes, you're not totally external. semi-internal, primary structural risk, social desirability bias. Okay, we'll see this probably in the analysis paragraph. Analytical blind spots. Yes, if professionals just talk together, then you might end up turning in circles and discussing the same things on and missing a couple of other things. Self-censorship. Here I'm not sure, but it will be discussed here, I suppose. Degree of methodological vulnerability, high. And let's see how come. The structural tension in your position arises from the clash between professional intimacy and scientific distance. Well, when you are doing a DBI, this is the core of the discussion, navigating between the two. While being peers, colleagues and friends grants you exceptional access and insider language, it creates a powerful social desirability bias. Participants might frame their perceptions to align with shared professional norms or maintain their expert status within your common network. Okay, I see. Here, people may want to look good, either by telling you what they think you want to hear from them, or by giving you their impression they're good, they have a good command of their stuff. So this means this significantly impacts data quality by potentially filtering out failure, incompetence, or irrational motivations that would be embarrassing to admit to a friend. Epistemically, you face acute analytical blind spots. Because you share the same professional common sense as your subjects, you risk treating their subjective justifications for MCS reconfigurations as self-evident truths rather than objects of inquiry. So you might take things for granted instead of questioning them. The boundary between a research interview and a professional venting session among friends becomes porous, risking collection of data that confirms existing industrial myths rather than interrogating them. Okay, so here, being too close professionally to the field may compromise data quality and therefore conclusions. So, let's say an external researcher with familiarity with professional familiarities, having professional familiarities with the field, with the topic, with let's say peers, former colleagues, professional connections. And here I think the difference will not be very big. But look, here we had, let's say, here level of embeddedness, semi-internal, it's the same concern as before. Primary structural risk, the same as before. Before we had 4, I think, no, we've got the same, so the 3. Degree of methodological vulnerability, medium, so it's less than before. And here is the explanation. The structural tension in your position arises from the co-construction of reality between you and your participants. As a former colleague and professional peer, you share a technical shorthand and a set of industry-specific norms that facilitate deep access, but at the same time constrain their inquiry. The potential impact on data quality is twofold. First, while participants might be more candid about unofficial perceptions, they second, are equally likely to engage in social desirability bias to maintain their professional standing and credibility within your shared network. Here, they want to look good. They still want to look good because you're not a neutral vessel. You are a knowledgeable peer, and your familiarity might lead participants to skip over foundational explanations, assuming you already know how it is, which means that there might be some blind spots. The epistemic risk here is taken for grantedness, which I mentioned before. Because you share the same professional logic as your subjects, you might fail to problematize the very perceived necessity you aim to study. You risk validating their justifications as objective truths rather than treating them as subjective constructs, potentially resulting in a study that mirrors professional common sense rather than critiquing it. And I would say this might confirm your own intuitions and your own bias. If people tell you what you already know, you might think, oh yes, I know that's like this. And I suggest a final test of this prompt, which is professional peers without direct acquaintances or connections. I'm unsure if they know much about myself. And you will see that here there will be something different. Here, level of embeddedness, external with professional affinity, which changes everything. Primary structural risk, well, still social desirability, so people want to look good. And this is something you will find most of the time. Whatever you do, you will be confronted with this. Analytical blind spots, we'll see soon. Degree of methodological vulnerability, low. And here is the analytical paragraph. I think it's low because some of the biases taken for grantedness we mentioned before is now sort of resolved. The structural tension in your position arises from the balance between professional proximity and social distance. As an external researcher with professional familiarities, you possess the technical literacy to grasp complex MCS nuances, yet you lack the personal history what typically triggers deep self-censorship. This allows for a stranger's confident dynamic where participants may feel safe disclosing perceptions they would not share with colleagues. But it remains likely to professional posturing, where they want to look like good professionals. And then they might not tell you exactly what you need to know, but what they think you want to know, or what they think would make them look good before you. Because participants view you as a peer but not a friend, they might prioritize rationalizing their perceptions, that's what I was saying, to align with industry standards, leading to a subtle social desirability bias. The primary epistemic risk is asymmetric empathy, where your familiarity with the topic might cause you to unconsciously fill in the gaps of their narratives with your own professional logic, rather than questioning why the perceived necessity in a particular way. This can result in a study that captures a standardized professional discourse rather than the messy, idiosyncratic reality of individual perceptions. we could infinitely run this prompt by adjusting this field matter. But what I wanted to show for tonight is that data access and data coherence with the research question is something that needs to be considered from the onset. So you select data for good reasons, because it helps you answer your research question, but also knowing what biases might arise, and ideally you must identify ways of overcoming or fixing those biases before they eventuate. So what I wanted to share with you is indeed it can be summarized as: first, access is not relevance. That's the first thing. Just because you have access to a company does not mean it is your field. Next, access is not pertinence. So we've discussed this. Then we have this question, which is representativeness is not legitimacy. It's different. And then your field is never neutral when you belong to it. And that's really what I want you to remember, you to ponder when you consider your fieldwork for the dissertation or the thesis. So I hope it was helpful, and I wish you a lovely evening and a great week ahead. And tomorrow and next week I will continue on methodology, and I will progressively engage in more practicalities. But I will try, like I said, to slightly readjust the structure of my stream, so that I can have some short clips and some stuff that could be my flagship or shop window for this Twitch channel, which for now is perhaps a wee bit sad, a wee bit invisible, honestly, and I would like it to be more visible. So of course, for this, should you know of anybody who could be interested in what we discuss on those Sunday nights for their studies, or because they're interested in AI, as I speak of AI at the beginning, so feel free to spread the word. So I will be very happy if you could spread the word, and if you had friends or connections who would connect, who would engage in our conversations. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next Sunday. So cheers.